Hi everybody, my name is Eldad. I'm the CEO and co-founder of KIDOZ. We're a relatively popular content distribution platform and monetization platform, and Shai asked me to say a few words about videos from our perspective. You know, as videos are a big part of what we do, and try to say no to Shai. It's like, you know, saying no to your wife. It won't be super successful. So basically, I don't want to repeat what was already said or will be said, so I'll just thank you and head up to the panel. No, kidding. I'll just say a few words and that's it. Basically, we're moving from this to this, and you can ask me, how do I know? Well, I know because I took this photo at my own house, and you know, for the record, not all of them are mine, but yeah, but this is it. Like, we're moving from, you know, the TV, you know, while Nick from Entertainment One might question me, but overrule me, but mobile is becoming the #1 screen for kids, the most preferred screen for kids. Also in terms of video consumption, video is the second most popular activity when it comes to kids on mobile devices, and obviously YouTube dominates this whole category. But I want to say a few words about YouTube, which you'll probably relate to. YouTube is messy, and even from a content recommendation perspective, it's messy. I just took a screenshot of my own, you know, family tablet. You know, I got recommendation for mousetrap challenges, probably for my 13-year-old, fidget spinners for my 9-year-old, but who got the one-night stand explained? Hopefully not my 16-year-old and not my wife. Beat me. This is how messy content recommendations are. But there are bigger problems with YouTube than, you know, content recommendation. And again, Nick would relate, you know, things that creators are doing with popular brands and popular characters. They're using them to create violent films and to mislead kids. And, you know, today even kids' content is not safe anymore on YouTube, so obviously YouTube is not the best way for brands to appeal and to get in front of kids. But other than YouTube, I think we see a very bright future for VOD platforms and for non-YouTube necessarily you know, video platforms. We see that nearly half of the content out there that's being produced is considering himself as building the content to be primarily for online, you know, from 5% 3 years ago. And when those content providers are being asked who provide them with most revenues, they say that the subscription-based platforms are providing them the biggest amount of revenues, even more than YouTube. And even when you look at the top apps on Google Play and iOS, most or many of the free apps out there are subscription-based. So we do see a bright future for platforms like the ones sitting here. One small note to say to you before I leave is that screen time still represents a big concern and needs to be taken care of as platforms owners. And it's not just coming from parents, it's also coming from even Apple shareholders and, you know, organizations and companies, and we should be aware, you know, for Lenovo, we created a nice character that pops up once in a while and is reminding the kid to go outside to play. How successful it is, I don't know yet, because it's about to be launched, but we need to keep it in mind that we need to allow parents, to give parents the ability to control their kids' screen time. And with this, I'll call Nate to panel to.
So I had the privilege of titling this particular panel, and it was really obvious to me how easy this title was. Videos everywhere. I have 6 kids of my own, and as soon as there is like the flash of motion on a screen, it's like everything else just kind of zooms to that. Or if you're sitting in a restaurant and something kind of pops up, whether it's something you want your little kids watching or not, all eyes are on it. So this is This is something that is clearly a really important thing in our society. Video continues to be an incredibly important way that communication happens, whether it be from corporations or artists or whoever else it might be. So particularly when we talk about kids, I think it's an incredibly important conversation for us to have, to think about the way that we are producing and the way that we are presenting this content. And so we have a really fantastic panel for you guys. I'm really honored to be on stage with these three men. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we're going to get into it, and we will, of course, leave time at the end for questions. So please start thinking of those. So please, Nick.
Thanks, Nate. So I'm Nick Gawne, the Chief Operating Officer of Entertainment One's family and brands business. We develop, produce, brand manage, and distribute children's brands, Peppa Pig and PJ Masks being the best kind of example of that today.
And I'm Nick Walters. I'm CEO and founder at Hopster. So we are a video and learning platform for preschool kids. We bring together video, books, music, and games, all organized around a learning curriculum in a single subscription app for tablet, mobile, and connected TV, targeted at kids aged between about 2 and 7.
I apologize for the raspy voice in advance. My kid got me sick last week, so I'm still recovering. But my name is Luca. I'm head of content at Azoomee. We are basically the older version of Hopster. We are a mixed media app, or service, I should say, that has video, games. We also have creative tools and a closed network chat for families to communicate. So we started out in the UK. We're a couple years old, but we've just started our global expansion into other territories through Vodafone's Accelerator program.
Cool. So whenever I was a kid, there were 3 times that I would watch TV. One was Friday nights. We had this thing in North America called TGIF, which was some fantastic family programming. Saturday mornings, I would get up before my parents, watch some cartoons, and Sunday night, I would watch Disney, was my thing. Nowadays, kids can consume it in much different ways. They can consume it more frequently. They can consume it in more locations. In what you guys have seen and what you guys are doing, what has been some of the biggest changes in the way that children are consuming video over the past 10 years?
So we're a producer and distributor rather than being platform-based, so we need to go where the audience is. So let's say 10 years ago in the UK, we would do a couple of content deals or maybe 1 or 2 content deals. And now we have a raft of services. We can license our content to Hopster, to Disney, to Nickelodeon, to Channel 5. The rights and the windowing within those rights has got vastly more complex. Previously, it was free and pay TV. Now it's free, pay 1, pay 2, pay 1 and 2, pay 2 and more movie-based. SVOD, AVOD, all this side loading, catch up, all this kind of stuff. But from our perspective, we make shows that we want kids to see, so we need to be where the audience is. We need to kind of parcel up our rights and do our agreements with the platform owners in a way that as many kids as possible can see those shows.
Right.
And that was the same 10 years ago as it is now.
Does that include cross-border as well?
So we would, it's funny, 10 years ago, it's easier to have a different kind of brand strategy in different territories. But now with kind of global platforms like YouTube, there's a concertina effect. So if you launch in the US, you need to launch in the UK fairly quickly because the content can leak out and be available across. But we would kind of license strategically in each different territory. Each territory has different means of, or different ways of consuming. SVOD is a big right in some markets. AVOD is a big right in other markets. It really depends on what the power of free versus pay and how people are watching TV in that territory.
Right. Luca, you do a lot of transmedia stuff where kids can come and they can play games, so they can watch videos. How do you think about that whenever you're thinking about the sort of content that is reaching your platform? Are you thinking about the content from the perspective of what is going to be the best medium to consume that content?
Yeah, so I mean, when we started out, we thought we were going to have a much more equal balance between video and games content. What's happened over time is we've realized, because it's so competitive in the video market, especially in the UK, games have been a hard hitter for us, and kids are probably spending about 60 to 70% more time in our games than they are in our video content. So that's drastically shifted our focus as far as how we're going to improve that user experience, where we're putting our resources for licensing and things like that. Video is not second right now, but games have definitely stepped up in terms of our service.
Right.
Yeah.
Nick, I remember being at a conference, it would have been maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and the big talk at that conference was how kids are doing multiple things. So they've got something on the television and they're playing a game on their phone or on their tablet. Now they're consuming that content on their tablet. How are you seeing the way that kids are using multiple platforms or multiple tools? Are they still using it at the same time, or how are they using those sorts of different tools?
Well, I think there's a couple of interesting things. I think one, I mean, we're preschool focused, so like we tend to see as a preschooler, like if you ever watched a preschooler or watching a video, like not only are they not multi-screening, but like most of the time, like the only thing in the world is that video. They're like right in there. But we definitely see different consumption patterns like across devices, as you'd expect. Sessions on TV are longer. You tend to see more movement from a video to a video. If you're on mobile, we see shorter sessions. We see people tending to snack more, switch between video and games more often. So those consumption patterns are different. I think the other thing that's interesting, though, is also how we see people using videos differently for different media. I think one of the interesting trends over the last, going back to the earlier question around like how has video changed over the last 10 years, is video used to mean like a show, right? Video was a TV show you sat back and watched. Like now video is like research. Like we're sitting down in homework, you use video to research because it's like how to. Video is like play along guides. Like you play along with Minecraft, you watch a video about it. We make quite a big thing out of books. We have a great partnership with HarperCollins who deliver books for us. Guess what? If you want to deliver a book to a TV, a great way to do that is by like turning the ebook into a video and delivering it as a video. So the book is now a video. So a lot of the times we kind of encode video content or encode as a video a piece of content that might not naturally be a video, and that's the way we deliver it to TV. So I think one of the interesting things is this kind of like video sort of eats everything. And becomes like a really default way of consuming content for us.
Right. We use the term walled garden a lot, and particularly when we look at products like what you both have versus YouTube, we could say that, you know, Luca and Nick, you both have walled gardens to some degree. It's something that is a lot more controlled. You have complete control over the content. You have complete control over the experience. I suppose with children you never have complete control, but something similar to complete control. In your minds, and then Nick, I'd like to come to you as you go across those after, but in your minds, what is the advantage to the walled garden versus maybe a more open platform, particularly when we're talking about children, beyond the obvious?
I mean, I think the main thing for us that we try to communicate is that everything is curated by people. So nothing is done with algorithms like YouTube Kids. Now YouTube Kids is starting to put people behind how they curate their content, which I don't understand why they didn't start that way, but it's not the philosophy of their company in the first place. But that's how we've always been. That's why we started. I think that's one of the big pluses of services like ours. Just knowing that someone who is experienced has watched it and made sure it's age appropriate.
Yeah, and I think it's like I think there's two levels, right? When we talk about safe or age appropriate, there's like, or wholesome, like good quality content for your kid. There's like one level which is like, is there anything like actively harmful here? Is there like a really scary video that's knocked off of like one of your favorite characters like being tortured? Like that's like a really bad thing you definitely don't want. And like in a completely open environment, your kids might find that. Even in like a semi like curated like bit of AI like mass market sort of safeguard human curation, you maybe weed that out. But then there's a level beyond that where we say, look, we want to help kids learn through the stories they love. So we're not just trying to like knock out bad content. We're trying to like actively pick beautiful stories that like fit into a curriculum that we worked with a bunch of academics and educationalists to deliver, where we have relevant material elsewhere on the service that supports the learning lessons in that video. And that's human intensive. Yeah, that's real, like, you know, that's highly skilled work where you got to really watch things, know things, carefully select and love things. And that's a very different experience from what you'd get in an open environment like YouTube Kids. And we think that's where we differentiate. That's where we try and deliver value.
Was it completely altruistic, the decision to go the walled garden for the sake of the child, or is there a strong business reason to go with the walled garden approach as well?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if you are comfortable with your child being in an open environment with loads of ads and people being able to upload whatever they want and like an algorithm to like find some, suggest some things which more or less accurately, like there's a really great solution out there for that called YouTube. So it didn't seem to make much sense for us to like try and do that, right? So in that sense, it was sort of commercially obvious that YouTube had mastered being YouTube, and we didn't want to be better at being, didn't want to try and be better at being YouTube than YouTube because they're really good at being YouTube. So in that sense, it was commercially obvious, but like it was also altruistic. I mean, we set out to create, most of the people who founded the company are parents, and we wanted to build a service that we'd want to give to our kids.
Right. Nick, as a content creator, how do you think about creating for open platforms like YouTube versus something that's more of a walled garden?
Sure. So our business model is to create, we have a small portfolio of super premium brands, and for us, the value of curation that Disney, that Nickelodeon, that Hopster offer is core to create that level of trust with the audience that we're looking for, with the parents that we're looking for. So our strategy is to create preschool and older brands, and that means developing consumer product lines that sit behind those. So in order to work that strategy, you need to select the best partners on day one, and those best partners are the Disneys and the Nickelodeons and the dedicated kids broadcasters that are closed platforms and offer that level of curation that creates the trust from the parents. So that's who we produce content for. That's who we produce content with, and throughout all of this, I can't see that changing. For me, there's two types of content. There's there's the focus content, as Nick described. It's a kid which is fully immersed in the world that they're seeing. They want to be part of that world. It's narrative driven. And then there's distracted content. The open platforms may be great for that distracted content. You can see a kid just scroll through YouTube. They'll watch 5 seconds of one video. They'll go down into the recommendations, 5 seconds of another. But for us, the value is in creating that premium narrative-driven long-form content. Long-form in kids could be 5 minutes an episode, 7 minutes, 11 minutes. But that's where the value is. That's where the narrative happens. That's where brands are created, and that's where we need to be.
Right. Yeah, please.
I might add another point to that, though. I mean, the other thing that people forget about YouTube is even though a lot of kids' favorite IPs and brands are on there, it's largely promotional content still. So besides the ads that kids are going to be exposed to anyway, mostly through YouTube, even when they watch a 5-minute clip or mashup of their favorite show, it's just brand promotion mostly for them to go watch it somewhere else. So, that's something else that we try to make clear to parents. It's free, but is it really free? At what expense is it free? It's still brand promotion. It's still advertising in an indirect way that's trying to, get your kid to go watch it somewhere else.
It's an interesting point. Sometimes it's difficult to try and convince parents to pay for things. Parents have a lot of things to pay for. So how do you convince them of the value of this? I mean, I think most parents would agree that they don't want their kids watching a ton of ads, but still there seems to be a barrier to get parents to cross over that, or is there?
Demonstrating that value is our biggest task, really, from data, from as far as our comms and our marketing from day to day. That's what we're trying to do. The first point and the first way we do it is what we've been discussing, which is it's curated, it's ad-free, doesn't involve in-app purchases. You're not exposing your kids to those things. And those are things that even sometimes adults get annoyed with. So you can imagine if a kid's playing a game and they're getting an advertisement after every level or every time they lose a level, it gets frustrating. For every 10 minutes of play, you might be getting 5 minutes of advertising. You would hate that as an adult. So think about it for your kid, too.
A bunch of years ago, I had the privilege of working on a kids-based product called Club Penguin, and I think one of the early success points of that product was, in fact, I remember within my first week, I was managing the support channels, and a child emailed in and said, "Oh, I love all the shirts that are in the catalog, but I really want a yellow shirt for my penguin because yellow is my favorite color." And I turned to the founder, who was then still the artist, and I said, "Hey, this kid wants a yellow shirt." And he kind of grumbled a little bit, but then he made a yellow shirt, and 2 hours later, we updated it a yellow shirt. And that turned to be a really successful point of the product, because traditionally, whenever you looked at console games, it was a long time to be able to iterate on those ideas. As video has moved to platforms that are far more iterative, how has that changed the way that we think about the way that kids speak into the product, or the way that parents speak into the products and the stuff that they're watching?
I appreciate that Nick, who sits on probably one of the most capital-intensive TV shows in the world, passed the mic at that point. Do you know what? I'm going to be honest. I think this is the dog that hasn't barked. Like, if you look at what video is getting created right now, like you have conventional TV channels who are not particularly iterative. You have Netflix and Amazon who have been investing a lot in kids content, but have not been have been commissioning, I think, in a way that's very recognizably still consistent with the way a traditional TV channel would commission. Same kind of budget, same kind of production standards. And then you have people producing for YouTube, where YouTube as a platform, for a whole bunch of reasons, tends to reward very high volumes, fast turnaround, rapid uploads. It's quite difficult to point to an example of someone who's built a enduring brand from the ground up on YouTube. I mean, you could talk a little bit about people like Blippi, who've done that. Some things came out of one country and then did well on YouTube and iterated well. But I think it's quite difficult to find a lot of examples of doing that. And in some ways, I think that what you'd kind of expect to see, which is a digital approach applied to quality video creation and rapid iteration, you haven't really seen. We launched last year an initiative at Hopster called Hopster Studios, where we've just started trying to do that, basically. We've just done, we did short form, relatively low budgets, higher than YouTube, but relatively low budgets. Got them produced in months, which was faster than TV, longer than YouTube. Got them on the platform, took some feedback, and we're producing our second slate, and we're going to be going into a second slate within 9 months of having the first thing done. Still think we can probably get that down and get that faster, but we're trying to do some experiments in that regard. And I think you will see that happen more as you see more specialist kids VOD operators like us, like Azoomee, some of the other people like Sky or Virgin Kids start getting into the space and getting into short form. I think you're going to see that iteration cycle speed up, and I think that's what comes next. I don't think you've seen loads of it so far.
That's great. That's exciting.
I think also the other thing that the digital landscape has created is more opportunities for sort of niche video genres to cut through and find their audience. I think a great example of that right now is Amazon channels. If you look on a lot of the channels that exist right now, they have some very, very specific channels. And for the first time, video producers who might be very interested in those areas actually have a way of cutting through and finding a market, which I think is really great.
Cool.
Just one thing to add. So we're not a platform, so we don't get the access to the data these guys get, but we get a lot of data from YouTube. We get a lot of data from our social media channels and our apps. And one thing that we always have to remember is it feels the data is quite dirty. There are a lot of other factors that are getting in the way of making kind of really clean analysis. An example I'd give is, so PJ Masks, one of our shows there's 3 PJ Masks, so Owlet, Catboy, and Gecko. And from a purely data-driven kind of view of things, you would think that we could look at our social media or the social media performance of each of those 2 characters and dial up one of those characters in future seasons. But there's so many things that get in the way of that: the placement of the character, the thumbnail, the quality of the thumbnail, the impact of the algorithm, say if you're taking YouTube data, that can you ever truly rely on what you're being given? 15 years ago, there was I'm sure there still is, there's always a kind of cold shudder of fear in the room when we talk about accountants taking over media businesses. And I think at the moment, it's kind of the algorithm taking over media business, the algorithm taking over creative decisions. So, and again, I guess we're kind of old media on this panel, but the quality of creators doing really strong storytelling in a way needs to be protected and is sacrosanct for creating really strong kids content.
Does the traditional media here have an opportunity to influence the way that tech is evolving in that way? I mean, if algorithms is the way that a lot of the tech companies are kind of evolving from this side of the sphere, and whether you're a content maker, you're coming from this side of the sphere, Do you have an opportunity to demonstrate the value in maybe the older way of looking at those sorts of things as opposed to looking at it purely algorithmically?
I'm not sure how compatible those two views are, because you can see the tech companies have their way of doing things. They have culture very much embedded, whereas storytelling production businesses are almost not the antipathy necessarily, but they just have very different ways of getting to creative decisions. And it's like marketing departments talking to accountants. It's a conversation that doesn't always work. And maybe the other guys want to chip in on this, but I haven't seen it working yet.
Yeah, I think it's important when we talk about like being digital in the way you create content. Like that doesn't necessarily mean you've got to have an algorithm which is like tell me what content to create or tell me what characters to create, or like I'm going to A/B test like 55 different like designs of the character. I think there are. For us, what being digital means is probably more a mindset thing. It's about, hey, we're going to be fast to market. We're going to commit relatively small amounts of budget. We're going to listen very closely to our early users. And by the way, listening can include like talking to people, right? Like we run a private social network for our most engaged users. It's very old school. We like write them questions and we listen to what they say. But we try and get that feedback quickly. We get that back into the production process. And then whether that influences what we make or how we make it, or whether it influences whether we focus on one series versus another, we're still trying to get that feedback, within months and having committed like maybe tens and thousands in budget rather than within years when you're already like millions in the hole. And I think that's when I think about iteration, when I think about using data, like that's a lot of the things I'm thinking about. I'm not necessarily, you don't necessarily need like deep blue, like churning away in a room to take a digital approach to content creation, if I can put it like that.
Right.
I also think, even though we have more data and algorithms sort of supporting how we decide to produce content, I don't think that's anything that new. I think even big budget content producers and video producers have always tried to find a formula that produces the right format that's going to be successful. I mean, look at every Marvel film ever. So, we have more information now that kind of informs us, but I don't think it's anything that new. I think it's existed for a long time as far as producers trying to figure out what's going to be successful in the most efficient way, even if it's a big budget film.
Nick, you work with both digital companies and you work with traditional media. What are some of the opportunities that you see in working with partners like Azoomee or Hopster as far as the way that your content can be packaged? I mean, for example, if you're putting something on the television, you have the relationship with the channel, but you don't necessarily have a lot of opportunity to do something else surrounding it. Whereas with digital, my assumption is there is a lot more, there's richness in having different elements that come into play.
Sure, we always want the kids watching our shows to want to really kind of take part in that world, and we license our content to Hopster, some of our content to Hopster, and they create experiences around that content, which really facilitates that engagement. So it's super important. I guess the kind of traditional department, the broadcasters are going there, the Sky Kids app and so on and so forth is also creating that, but from a Hopster perspective, the curriculum element as well. Again, it's about creating trust. I think kind of parents love to see their kids interacting with brands and content in a positive way. Not just, I mean, we're in preschool, but not just playing a kind of slash and bash game and then moving on to the next thing. So it does provide a great opportunity. It also allows us to create gaming, or allows us to license out gaming rights to people, so we don't have to necessarily focus so much on smaller games, and we can focus on bigger digital experiences as well.
Yeah. Maybe I'll start this question. I'd like all three of you to answer this, but I'll start with the two of you first. Has video on demand, has video kind of reached its maturity? Nick, you alluded to some things that you'd love to see. Have we reached a maturity though, or kind of a plateau, or is this still in its infancy? And maybe if you believe it's in its infancy, where do you see this going within the next 10 years?
I think it's definitely in its infancy. I think you got a whole bunch of things still to happen. There is no one on the panel from Nickelodeon or Disney, so I can say this, but I think it is like fairly clear that there used to be like a debate around where the bottom was on like linear pay TV for kids. that debate is probably still ongoing, but I think it's fairly clear, like, the bottom is a bunch lower than most people thought it was. Like, and I think that's public ratings data. You can just see, like, the total share of linear pay TV kids viewing is going down. I think one of the side effects of that is, like, there's an awful, like, kids in the UK used to watch about 8 billion hours of TV a year. 25% decline in that means there's 2 billion hours of time spent that just came free to go and spend time on other devices. I think you should expect in the UK alone, like, another 2 billion hours to come free over the next few years. That puts a bunch more energy into the system, so I think you should expect a whole bunch more consumption going on. I think in the VOD space right now, you have, like, a lot of people trying to run their own proprietary branded VOD service, not always with a very clear reason for why that should exist versus Netflix. I think there's probably going to be a shakeout there. I don't think everyone who's doing thematic VOD is going to exist in the same form in 4 or 5 years' time. But I also think a lot of these digital platforms, once you have a user base and you have a core technology stack, you can begin doing interesting things on top of that. There are interesting things we could talk about how a product like ours works with connected toys over time, about how we integrate voice recognition over time. Clearly, it sounds like one of the places that Disney are going with their direct-to-consumer product is there's going to be a significant tie back to recreation, so that it's going to be not just it doesn't sound like it's going to be a pure VOD product. Sounds like it's also going to be kind of a locker to your whole experience of the Disney world. I should clarify, like, that's purely based on public speculation. I don't know that, but that's just what I've kind of read. So I think if you conceptualize what you're doing as a VOD platform as, hey, we are a technology product designed to serve our users' needs, I think a whole bunch of things further down the track start to get built on top of that. So I think you have those two kind of inputs, really. You have a bunch more time coming free. You have a bunch more things you can do. The people who win, though, will be the people who are really responsive to users' needs and smart about their distribution for doing it.
Oh. Luca, what opportunities does Azoomee have in the future in the next 10 years?
I have to agree, because it's going to evolve with the technology. And however the technology evolves, whether that's based on consumer desires or needs, or whether it's based on completely new designs that nobody ever even thought of. I mean, you look at Netflix, when they started, it was DVDs to your door through the mail. They saw this window of opportunity with a streaming service. They were the first ones to take it, and now we're all hooked onto mobile devices, watching streaming videos. So, maybe the next thing could be AR for video on demand. It could be another technology. Again, I think it's going to circle around what consumers really want and what they're comfortable with, and what they can do at home and what they can do on commutes and in those spaces where they feel comfortable and safe. So there's so much potential for where video on demand is going to go.
Nick, as a content creator, as a creator in a world where creators are getting more and more tools themselves to become creators, what do you think the future looks like for creators?
It's a good question. As I listen to these guys speak, I understand and I see where they're going, but I think one thing we're missing is that it's expensive to create content. And again, I'm talking with a bit of a preschool kind of preschool bias, but 50 to 11 minutes costs 8 million euros for kind of TV grade content. And that's financed by tax credits, it's financed by subsidies, it's financed by broadcaster license fees, linear broadcaster license fees. In order for that great content to be made, there has to be financing from broadcasters, and whether it's a Netflix or a Disney or a Channel 5 or so on and so forth. Linear TV might have a bottom, but if it does have a bottom, you still need that financing to take place. And the people who are going to finance those shows are going to be the people who maintain that relationship of trust with the parent. So they're going to be the parent's first destination of where their kids should consume content. Excuse me. So I'm not crying. That sounds like I'm crying. I'm not crying.
It's really emotional.
Emotional about that. I can't speak to Disney. I can't speak to Nickelodeon. I can't speak to Netflix. But to what Nick said at the end, it's about the relationship of trust. It's about serving those people's needs. And I think it's important not to or understate the importance of that relationship of trust that the Disneys and the Nicks and the Channel 5s and the CBeebies have at the moment. So I think any future, I can't see a future without those guys playing a big part of it, because they control a lot of the production of the quality content that people actually want to watch.
That's really interesting. Yeah, please.
And then just to add to that, I mean, I think it's worth saying that like a bunch of the people who run channel businesses now are like and I think Disney's the prime example of this, are like increasingly well positioned to like survive and thrive in the emerging world, and you have to give credit to Disney for the boldness of the way they've engaged in that space. So I think like none of that says you don't end up having people with big budgets, strong relationships with the user, who continue to invest behind big shows with great storytelling, with big budgets that parents want to see, because I think that's no question there continues to be a demand for that. Does that look like all of the current broadcast participants successfully making that transition? I think is an open question, should we say.
So do you think actually the winners in this space, it seems like video is getting quite populated and it will continue, but isn't this like the gold rush? Aren't the winners the ones who are going to look to reduce the time spent creating the content? So looking at using AI and machine learning applications to dynamically shift the aspects of the stories you watch, which means therefore you create a bank of libraries of videos which are then automated, which you can then use to stitch stories together.
So I was actually saying no, and I think the reason I say no is like I think we sort of saw that, right? Like there is a bunch of content on YouTube which is like effectively that approach. Like I mean, like you create like 5,000 versions of like a nursery rhyme until you have like the like platonic idea of a nursery rhyme, or at least the stickiest possible version of a nursery rhyme. And I think if you look at like the word salad of algorithmically optimized terms that populate like a lot of YouTube kids videos, like it's fairly clear that like whether algorithmically or through like human testing, someone has been through and optimized very heavily around the search parameters of that algorithm. I think we kind of saw a backlash against that approach in 2017, because people do care about what their kids are watching, and like if you optimize to the nth degree, like you do end up with things which can be engaging and clickable, but like not good in any meaningful sense. And eventually parents care about that. I think I have to believe that parents care about it, and I think we see the evidence that the parents do care about it. So I don't see how we get out of, and I'm glad I don't see how we get at how you get away from great creative storytelling and like a significant degree of human curation, because we shouldn't want that. Like you shouldn't really want like an AI like creating like a salad of videos for your kid. Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. I think one, there is a I think kids is a particular area, right? Like I mean I think parents, you see in a bunch of areas, people are not willing to tolerate things for their kids that they would be for themselves, like cigarettes and alcohol being one example. So I do think, and again, as a society, we should be much more careful about how we generate stuff for our kids. I do think that's kind of important. I think, don't get me wrong, I absolutely think you can apply technology to give you ideas. I think you can, I can totally see, I think one of the things YouTube does well is it does relevance, right? Like if a volcano has just exploded and an asteroid has just gone past and you want to find out information about that asteroid that happened yesterday, YouTube's a great place to go. And I can totally imagine like mass scale AI-driven approaches to ensuring you're producing content that was relevant and that kids cared about. Do I think that becomes can I think it speed up production techniques? For sure. Can it help get it out there faster? For sure. Do I think it like replaces like human creativity? Like, God, I hope not.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I think when we talk about particularly children's art, is ultimately what we're talking about, winning, we have to be careful that we define winning properly. Winning is not simply the race to the highest amount of profit, although that's important as we're in business, but there has to be something more than just maximizing profit, doesn't there? Yeah.
I like one-word answers. So this is first going to be a yes-no question and then a one-word answer. The first question is, with YouTube now facing some scrutiny around whether it's a general audience platform, which doesn't have kids, versus really more like a mixed audience platform, which has tens of millions of children, watching content. Do you think that if they have to shift and treat a lot of the kid-directed channels as governed by COPPA compliance and the option for behavioral targeted advertising going away, that many of the preschool content on YouTube will disappear because they won't make nearly as much money that they do today in the future? Yes or no? Do you think revenue will drop significantly if they need to shift focus on YouTube?
For YouTube, though.
On YouTube. So will the content creators on YouTube lose money? Stick around. Nicholas?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know many people making a whole bunch of money on YouTube today in the current environment.
How about Ryan, who does the unboxing videos?
Right.
Roughly 11 million a year.
Yeah, I mean, I should maybe clarify that. Like, I think I don't know that many people who are like there's this view sometimes that YouTube is this gold mine.
Blippi's a good example too.
Blip is a good decent example of someone who's done that. Like, those guys probably, yeah, actually. Those guys probably, yeah. I think there's a bunch of, like, if I think about, like, long-form storytellers who've, like, have content up on YouTube, I'm not sure people are doing it for them for the $1,000 per million views that they make right now. So there are probably a couple of examples who are, but I think the majority of people are there for other reasons. So I guess for those guys, my answer would be no. That was not one word. Sorry.
Nick from...
I can't remember the question.
Well, the content creators on YouTube.
So it depends how you use YouTube. You can either use YouTube as a social platform, a la Facebook, and I'm kind of assuming we're in a world where Facebook doesn't monetize. So you can either use YouTube as a social platform, and therefore there will be some content up there to amplify your brand that exists in more traditional distribution channels, or you can use YouTube as one of your primary distribution channels. If that primary distribution channel you're not earning any money for, then I think that becomes a problem for a content creator because the economics don't work. If you're using YouTube as a social media platform, then I can imagine that content still being there.
Cool. Last one, and really one-word response. Unboxing videos. What is so appealing to kids about unboxing videos? One word.
Excitement.
Nick from Hopster?
Discovery.
Magic.
Last question, I'm told. I just wanted to get the thoughts of the panel on how we talk about the potential winners and losers in this space. How important do you think it is for the winners to be making global plays on rights, or is it possible for local players to still have a level of success?
Good question. Our experience, so we have an app called World of Peppa Pig, which is a subscription app available in all good app stores. The different territories monetize in different ways. So World of Peppa Pig as a subscription app works in the US and the UK for us. Would we try and localize that into Brazilian Portuguese or Spanish and invest a huge amount in that platform there? The economics of that decision are different. So I think for us, we would take it on a brand by brand basis. It's what partnerships you've got in that territories. Normally, we would license our brands into a territory to get the best chance of having a consumer products business off the back of that brand. If it was a global deal and we weren't going to get it because they weren't strong in that territory, then it becomes a kind of financial decision of whether that territory is worth sacrificing, so to speak.
Yeah, I think the right way to think about this is like if there is something about that territory that means that you need to do something in like a particular niche that no one else is able to do. So if you like local language is really important, or some particularly deep area of local culture is really important, then sure, there's local champions. But no question, this is going to end up being a much more global world than it was 5 or 10 years ago. I think you look at Australia, like you had a whole bunch of local SVOD incumbents. Netflix came in and blew 3 out of 4 of them away without having a single employee on the ground. And that's like a very different paradigm from 10 years ago. So more global, but not completely so, I think is probably the right way to think about it.
Luca, you have 10 seconds for the last word here.
I would say it depends on the strategy. What's your distribution strategy when you go into that territory? You know, some people are going direct to consumer. It's really hard to do. Others like us are going, you know, straight to partnerships. We're going B2B2C. So, all right, you know, what's your strategy?
Cool. Gentlemen, thank you so very much for your thoughts, for your honesty, for opening up, and for everybody for your questions, for being a great audience. So thanks very much.